Started here. Hero used today, our church from pastors, former pastors and pastors of the day, and then it was put together. It was perused. Reverend Order. This is time. That's for another time or another lesson. But our minister went there and ministered to the they were Episcopalian. So that's where we're going with this. Real deal. And try to keep it interesting. Read. Over to the top of there.
Over to the top of there.
She's a way better reader. I'll read some. I'll be reading some.
Okay, so it tells you that, so beware, it won't go well. The congregation of the Moravian Church at Graceham, Frederick County, Maryland, was organized by Bishop Matthew Hill on the 8th of October, 1758. Therefore, by special services held from Wednesday, October 7th, to Sunday, October 11th, 1908, the congregation celebrated its sesquicentennial anniversary, for which the writer, Reverend Order, prepared an historical account compiled from the first church register, the diaries, etc., in the Graceham archives, on which the historical portion of the following sketch is based. And this is the introduction to modern Graceham and the vicinity. In the northern part of Frederick County, Maryland, 57 miles west of Baltimore, on the line of the Western Maryland Railroad, which in 1867, desiring to extend its line to Hagerstown, was granted the right-of-way through land owned by the Moravian Church, lies the pleasantly situated village of Graceham. The main street of the village ascends the gradual slope of a hill rising from the Moravian Church and parsonage at its foot, which the Geodetic Survey has marked as being 449 feet above sea level, until at its crest near the upper end of the street, about 1/5 of a mile towards the west, it reaches an elevation of 490 feet. Shade trees on both sides of the street and fruit trees in the gardens and orchards in the rear of the houses, some of the latter having been built in part during the early years of history, and the absence of the toil and turmoil incident to towns in which factories or other great business enterprises are located, give to Graceham an air of peaceful repose, which seems in keeping with its early character as a Moravian Church settlement. The Moravian Church and adjoined parsonage, the only ones in the place, are solidly constructed of brick, the former the third church edifice erected, preceded by the first in 1749 and the second in 1772, dating from 1822, and the present parsonage on the site of the original Gemein House, as it was called, from 1797. They stand in a spacious and well-kept lawn, bordered with locust trees and surrounded by a neat wire fence. The church steeple, similar in style to that of Central Moravian at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, is one of the first objects to greet the eye on approaching Grace. Crossing a hollow in the rear of the church and the railroad track on the rising ground beyond, the cemetery is reached, surrounded by cultivated fields, except on the west side, along which passes the trains of the Western Maryland Railroad. Okay, and that's where you wanted me to stop?
I think that'd be good enough. I do.
Okay.
Thank you. So I just wanted you to have the flavor. To me, that just appeals to me what this town might have looked like. A quiet burg. I remember it as that. Well, it still is. Next thing we're going to do, have any questions? Have any questions?
A congregation in organic union with a Moravian church, that upon application being made to the Brother John Herzer as
This talking about that they can't find. It was a sort of it was a Lutheran church, but many denominations worshiped there because that was the only show in town at that time.
itinerant evangelist affiliated with the Moravian Brethren, Nicholas Henry Eberhardt, George Soel, Frederick Post, Francis Bowler, Thomas Yarl, John Layton, Matthew Gottschalk, Leonard Schnell, Samuel Herr, Utley, had to procure for them or at least a late to fill. Nike had been ordained at the General Synod of the various denominations in Pennsylvania, held at Oley, Pennsylvania in March of 1744, not who inspector or superintendent of the Lutheran Church in America, and so
We're pleading our case here.
yeah, you want me to keep going here?
No.
Okay.
So let me try to explain this. Eventually in 1746, that little church door was locked down there to Moravians. The Lutheran Church, you see when they said that this Bowler was not yet a Moravian. What happens is, I think when the Moravians got down there and there was no other church people, or no other denominations, the people were attracted to them. To start with, we had good pastors and good people, and they couldn't get them. So I think Muhlenberg got a little nervous. Him and Zinzendorf didn't get along to start with very well. So I think they got intimidated that we were trying to steal their flock. The minister goes there, everybody likes him, well, he's a Moravian. Well, that doesn't look good. So they locked the door. And not only that, you're going to hear in a minute when we go to Annapolis, we have friends in the neighborhood that are not Moravians. We have friends now who are not Moravians. Yeah. But it works just fine. That wasn't our major concern, is to build huge numbers and open churches. So that's why I'm giving you a shift of this. So now we're going to go to Delaney's gift, 17, 18, 19, and 20.
A few miles distance from the church was the farmer.
And I may interrupt sometimes. Yep. My uncle and my cousins tell me that the first floor, the logs are oak, and the second floor, they're poplar. Going to Winston-Salem, that wagon road runs in front of that house and barn, and the roadbed is still there today. And you can see where it goes down through the golf course, where the trees are on each, and it was filled in because it washed out over 200, it being a low spot and no cover on it, that dirt washed away. So that is a great place.
Is it the houses on reservation, the land and the house?
I don't know. It's golf course. Is it land?
The house.
I don't know. It's golf course. Is it land preservation?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I doubt it.
If it's
The Moses.
The golf course that they had.
Right.
So I think that was why they did it. So you're saying that house was built around 1742? Because that was when he came to. He built the house, and the house had already been built.
Or it was already built. I'm not sure.
Right. So,
But it's an ancient property.
Yeah.
The barn is built, I didn't realize it. I just thought it was a barn. It is. So it probably was a log, because there are some log barns in that area. I got pictures of one of them, all log inside. But the barn is just framed different. It is very interesting. It's a European type of framing.
Yeah.
There was an article about it.
Probably German style.
So, well, anyhow.
Doesn't that barn have stone walls?
Little German.
I mean,
No.
No.
It's all wood?
Wood, it was falling, back wall was falling down, and it is straight as an arrow and beautiful, the golf course owner.
Who fixed it?
The golf course owner.
Jeff Barber.
Yeah, Jeff
Jeff.
Barber.
I couldn't remember
He
the
owns
last name.
playground specialist too, so.
And he's gonna fix the house up, he's gonna fix the spring house, it's a stone spring house. I drank a lot of water there.
I didn't think about it. I have pictures of the spring house. I'll bring them next week.
I got other things I forgot to bring
Yeah.
today too, so.
The spring house is delightful. It's my favorite of the buildings. The building to the right that has a fireplace in it, and they did the butchering, and she made her, Aunt May made apple butter. That was a big dealie. And it's called Maple Run because they had maple trees, and they were the furthest north place where you could make maple syrup. And she would give maple syrup to each of her siblings for their Christmas present. Okay.
Yeah.
Having offered the use of his house for the school and meetings of those who favored Mr. Nike, they were held there for some time, probably until the winter of 1748-49, during which Reverend George Neisser, Mr. Nike's successor, having gone to Annapolis with Jacob Mathis, who was not a Moravian but was connected for some years with the undenominational congregation in Monocacy. Then that goes over here. Acquainted, and on whose land they had probably settled. Having mentioned to him their trouble with surveyor Prince George County of Western Maryland, Frederick County being organized the following year, 17 province lying special names to tracts of land by settlers. The 10-acre tract donated by Honorable Daniel Delaney was named Delaney's Gift. It was surveyed as a rectangle having 2 rods, exactly 1/4 of a mile, of 20 perches or containing square rod or 10 acres. The beginning point was a bounded white oak on the south side of the spring leading to Captain Owings Creek, a draft of the minor Casey, to be held by Culverton or...
I guess I wouldn't have read that.
Yeah. I can't read it,
That's
but...
drier than you know what.
Yeah, Delaney's Gift. Do you want to go down to there?
I'd stop there.
Okay.
Let me see what's here.
So that 10 acres, that was pretty much straight up Main Street through town?
No,
Oh,
it's
that wasn't
this
it?
way.
It's this way.
Okay, so where the town sits was not part of it?
That's another.
That's later.
That's coming up.
Okay,
What
Yeah.
the,
That's at Owens Creek. That's Hunting Creek down there.
So this is Owens Creek down here.
This is Owens, but I thought the land was down there where the farm is.
No.
Oh, this is the town.
I'm sorry, we're talking about right here.
We changed
We-
locations.
We moved from Wellers to here.
Okay.
And I think we have all of it.
Over to Owens,
No,
or did it?
over to the railroad track, over to the woods up here, I think, and over to Tom's house, just this side of his house, and then to the cemetery, not all of it, to the end of the old part of the cemetery, and up here to,
back in the parking lot.
back in the parking lot, at the end of the parking lot. I think that's the 10 acres.
That seems like a
That's
big
10
10 acres.
What?
I thought for some reason we had 14 acres.
No, we have 10 acres.
But that's the original. It grows.
So, okay.
what's the one? What's the one?
I'm sorry, let me,
It's how the British measured at that time.
They make it right.
well, I'll read this. We can therefore picture to ourselves this 2-story log building, that was 2-story down there, standing alone in the woods with no very near neighbors, furnished in the most simplest and primitive manner, with only such articles that were absolutely necessary. Some of that furniture in there, a furnished parsonage, and we had no place for it. Much of it was given back when we realized we made a big mistake. But the cupboard where the bun baskets are and the cups are, I feel sure that was made for that purpose. The desk in there, some of the other implements sitting around was part of when a pastor came, because many times when over Pittsburgh, so he didn't have, furniture, so.
Bathtub, no, probably they would have done sprinkling.
Yeah,
They
we,
didn't do it typically, I mean, they can do immersion, but I don't
Yeah.
think they typically didn't do immersion.
that appealed to me at first, but
What they use it for?
Multiple children, probably.
Family time. Went into the,
You gotta remember, back in those days, they didn't take baths too frequently.
No, they didn't, they did not take
I
baths.
guarantee you they didn't.
And then when they do it all at once, I guess.
share the water.
They
They did them all.
they
man.
dipped them one at a time.
It must have looked like mud when they get there.
No,
Oh my goodness gracious.
Who wants to go first?
The little kids went first, the husband was the last.
No, the wife was the last.
Was he?
Yeah.
All right, the meeting hall on the second floor, having only a chair and a table for the minister, benches for the congregation, a gun corner, perhaps as there was later in Apples Union Church. Now there is, when you go up the steps to the attic, a concave in the wall, but I don't think it's long enough for those long rifles they had. So I don't know where the gun corner would have been. I've never seen it in my time. This is fireplaces in there. Have you ever looked at it? Yeah, there are fireplaces. The upstairs to work, what's left, it's kind of cobbled and sawed into and messed up. But the workmanship in the railings was beautiful one time of day. But they used that attic. I think people boarded up there, I think. It doesn't say so in here. But some of those kids, well, we'll talk about it a little later, when they had the boarding school, it got up to a lot of kids. I don't know, maybe more than 50 came from.
We were told, learning about it, that because we were between Bethlehem and Winston-Salem, it was Salem at that point, it was a stayover place for the Moravians headed one way or the other, and just throw them up in the attic. They,
At least there was a roof over their head.
Yeah.
You're going to hear more about that. I have some nice articles about who came to visit and what they did. I talked about the walk, informing us that instrumental music with violins commenced last year in a very imperfect manner, as was made more effective the Lord's blessing, so that the singing of the congregation was greatly improved. So there we are. 20. All right, we're done that. 23 and 24, Ann.
Okay. The Right Reverend Matthew Heel, with Mrs. Heel, and the Reverend John Zom and Mrs. Zom having arrived on Thursday, October 5th, the bishop, after inspecting the Gemein house, and together with Brother Runt and Brother Zom, visiting members in their homes on Thursday afternoon, and
I had a prayer with them, and he talked about things, and we were more agreeable to that then. I remember the day Frank Jones was here, he just sat out in his car and he just went someplace and knocked on the door, come in, they had a cup of coffee and some cookies, and he visited for an hour or so and then got in his car and went someplace else and knocked, and I'm told, ask Pastor. So we're too busy I suppose, for that. But they do, our pastors now do visit the sick and the needy. When someone's in need, they're there.
I still think that occurred here up into probably the late eighties, early nineties.
But Terry Folk told me he had difficulty. If he
Yeah.
called people to make an appointment to go visit, say, I'd like to come have a visit with you, he said, I wouldn't get back to him. Of course, maybe didn't like him, I don't know.
Well, they came to my
I would
house
think.
quite a bit. I mean, Frank Jones, I can remember,
Well, Frank,
yeah.
I just talked to him not long ago, we talked about that. He said he had no trouble at all. He just went to visit people.
Yeah, well, people weren't out and about as much
Right.
those days.
Right.
You know, mom was always home.
Lived his work at home.
Well, he maybe knew where people
They
would be
still do
home
it. They
too.
still do it. They still do. I mean, I know Terry does. My God, I mean, you never know whenever he would go any place, like going to the hospital or anything, he would knock at the door with this little hat. You'll be sick, and we have a cup of coffee. Just unexpected, uncalled. He was always there.
And perhaps part
For
of
no
the
reason.
tradition started with Count Zinzendorf, because we have accounts where he went into the homes to visit with people. And, you know, it was in writing. So if those pastors were going to follow in the steps of Zinzendorf, whom they revered, they needed to get out and about. You know, we don't know what all the traditions were at that time, but we do know that the count went into the homes, and that was a big deal because he was the count. He was the big shot, you know, and yet he came into the homes of those who were not
Yeah.
big and important,
Yeah.
supposedly.
My recollection too, when they would come into visit, I can remember Reverend back as far as Reverend Down, but it'd always maybe start with a prayer and end with a prayer, but then the conversation wasn't necessarily based around the church.
It might have been fishing
Yeah.
or,
But still, the fact that they, you know,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. They're visiting members in their homes on Thursday afternoon and Friday, held conference with the brethren on Friday evening and Saturday morning. Several services were held on Saturday the 7th, and the bishop presented Brother Zom, who had been ordained a deacon on September 3rd in Bethlehem, to the congregation as their minister. 7 persons were, and the married women, Elizabeth Magdalena Vellard, Maria Sarah Moser, because we have
Well, Leonard Moser, who's the Moser family grandfather, he was a member of this church. He was a charter member of this church.
And we have a Sarah, you know, they've carried the name. It's still there. Maria Elizabeth Pratzman, Christina Schmidt, wife of Casper Schmidt, and Elizabeth Weller. Afterwards, the first celebration of the Lord's Supper, or Holy Communion, took place, there being 14 participants. The ministerial brethren, Heil, Zom, and Runt, with Mrs. Heil, Mrs. Zom, and 9 communicant members. The married brethren, Jacob Weller, George Gumpf, George Harbaugh, Lawrence Pratzman, Leonard Moser, Peter Vellard, and there's 2 spellings here, one of which was very similar to Willard, which is a name we're familiar with.
It is Willard.
And Casper Schmidt, and the married women, Catherine Harbaugh and Rosina Gumpf. These had all been communicant members of the Moravian Church during their residency in Pennsylvania, and now, together with the non-communicants, became the founders or charter members of the newly organized congregation. Appropriate services were also held for those present as guests and for the young people and children. On the next day, Monday, October 9th, a general love feast was held from 7 to 8 a.m., and afterwards the congregation council assembled. Bishop Heil presiding, in which various matters of importance were considered, and George Harbaugh and they were all sextons or sacristans. On Wednesday,
We're going to stop there.
okay,
A question. The fellow was ordained a deacon. Was there a Moravian seminary in Bethlehem at the time?
I have no idea.
How would he have been trained?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if the seminary would have been established by that time. It might have been,
He would have been trained maybe in Europe.
yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, you could have been trained in Europe. And
What year was that?
1758.
Oh, 58.
It might not have been established by that point.
But it
I'm
couldn't
not
have been.
sure. No.
Bethlehem, we're actually, Lidditz or Nazareth was first.
Yeah,
So Bethlehem didn't come till a little bit later. Actually, Sheriff,
Ordination at your home congregation. Zom was ordained at Bethlehem, that being his home place, I guess. I don't know. What else do you want me to do?
all right, so that's page 26. I should have it marked right there.
This?
Yes, that block.
Okay, 1760 noted, October 21st, after a piece of ground had been cleared, the first cemetery was laid out. It was 86 feet square, being the oldest part of the present cemetery.
That would be the flat stone area.
The entrance was originally on the southwest, the Western Maryland Railroad now passes. A path across the hollow in the rear of the church with a bridge over the little stream running through it.
I have pictures. I meant to bring some of this stuff along. I forgot. I'll bring it next week. But it shows, as an old picture, it shows like a stream or a washout down here. These springs ran pretty good through this hollow. And there's a little bridge over that when you walked over to the cemetery.
It's there now, yeah.
That's correct. And drain pipes under the ground. You
Yeah,
don't see.
because they always trying to pick up land where there was water. The water was very important.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the rear of the church, with the bridge over the little stream running through it, led to the gate of the cemetery. The next day, October 22nd, after the cemetery had been solemnly consecrated by the pastor, the Reverend Francis Bower, the first interment in it took place, that of Catherine Barbara Schmidt, a daughter of brother and sister Casper Schmidt, age 18 years, 3 months, and 2 days.
There should be, is there one more thing? Let me see below there. Was prayed in the cemetery. We started. In later years, before Graceham was built, the earliest service was generally held at 9 a.m., as nearly all the members lived too far away. August 23rd, brethren agreed to build a new spring house that was not the present spring house, which was built, that was a log spring house first. In 1828, they built this one that's here now.
The 1828 is the new one.
Yeah, that's a new spring house out there.
If this was Moravian land, then how do we have the Bent's house? When did that come and under what circumstances?
Well, this CEC house was sold to the Savicools, and the house was built. There was a log house, and this lot over here was sold off. It doesn't say anything about it that I can find in the history.
If you remember Jim and Louise Bentz, the house we tore down was Louise's home place. It's where she
No,
lived.
Tommy's was.
Tom, yours
Tom's
was. I knew that it was around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And Belinda grew up there, right?
yeah.
Belinda and
Humrich.
Lisa grew up in the house behind us.
Yes.
They lived there a long time.
The house we tore down,
The house that was torn down, yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
So there
And-
were two houses back.
About when?
yes. What?
19.
Two besides the Savicool?
There's one house beside the Savicool house.
Right.
Right, where the-
Tore that down back in,
What?
what, 88,
It
Yeah.
actually
89, when I first started,
Huh?
got
See that
involved.
house in the back there, that's where the sediment pond is now.
Yes, that's right, and the Bentzes lived there.
My mom and
Charlie,
dad, that's the first house they lived in when they got married.
and they used the spring house for a refrigerator. They told me they put butter in there and other stuff. They used their spring house. And actually, we got water from that spring house till I think 1949. There was a jet pump, I remember as a kid, had a shelf in there with a jet pump on it. And I remember 1949, the old, up here in the front, there was a well driller there, you know, the guy, one of those stompers, he's out there stomping that well. So, So now we own all the land we ever owned and more, except uptown.
Right. The town,
The
the
homes.
Moravians owned the whole town at one point.
At one time, yes, 30 acres. We're gonna talk about that coming along here, I think. I think I have it. If not, I'll do it next week. We bought 30 acres from a neighbor that had a lot of land, 600 acres. So we bought 30 acres from them, and that was the town. And we still own the field up there that goes out Graceham Road. There's a big, well, not a big field, but a pretty good sized field.
And
And Devin.
the people at that time were so short, so that's why the house is so small. I mean, you know,
Well-
like where
Here,
all of them,
it wasn't, the upstairs was only 6 feet high.
yeah.
My head wasn't that far from the ceiling.
And this one,
Is it now, it's that way, that kitchen section.
Yeah.
That was the original house there.
Well, it was less the heat.
That's the,
I guess, I guess
Yeah,
that's,
well-
I don't know.
Well, and they only went to their bedrooms to sleep. You know, it was not, you know, the place where the teenager hung out in his room or something. There was too much to do.
yeah.
To be hanging out.
If you go in the cellar under that kitchen part of Timmy's house, there's still log and plank. The floor is still plank and there's still log under the new joist.
Yeah.
I'm missing something. I don't want it right. Here it goes. Now, we were August the 8th, 1758. We were organized as a denomination. Now, on October, thank you. On Wednesday, October the 11th, Brother Zalm opened a school for the children. So 3 days later, we were in action. We opened a school. And that school lasted till about 1833 or thereabouts. We may hear about that later on.
So almost 100 years.
Yes, till we sold a piece of land to the county up here on Graceham Road. The school used to be there. I'm not sure it's there anymore. Little schoolhouse. Out behind where Charlie Fry lived, that lot behind him, the schoolhouse was there. I think that's where it was.
There are pictures of it.
Yeah, I have pictures of my grandmother standing in front of it. But, so that's how long they were committed. You're in a congregation that their ancestors, I mean, they did it right. They didn't mess around. And they taught kids, now I expect they might have had to pay something, they taught kids that weren't Moravians too. Somewhere in here, so as I'm reading through this and finding stuff, they taught kids that weren't Moravian too. They were included. One time they had so many, they had to get, a preacher used to do it. Not only did he do whatever preachers do, pastors are called to do, but he taught school. And it got so big that he couldn't handle it anymore. I think it was a lot of kids. If I see the number,
Yeah.
it was impressive.
Well, everybody got a kid, and they were big on education. That was the first thing. That's
Well,
why-
and they educated both the boys and the girls. So it wasn't the girls staying home
Yeah,
and the boys coming to school. They all were going to school.
yeah. They were big in education.
I think we're gonna get to this, and I got a lot yet to do. Are you okay with this?
yeah.
You all right if we go on a couple weeks? Do you mind that?
No.
All right, I'm going anyway.
You're the boss.
Could you read that for, this is, I thought this was, yes, this is about the building, the
Gemein house.
The Gemein House, the wing we have there now. That's how it was built.
Do you want to give a definition of a Gemein house?
What?
Do you want to give a
Well,
definition?
Gemein is a meeting house, schoolhouse. It was just a
Church.
Church. It was everything. And it was everything.
And the pastor lived there.
And the pastor was a parsonage. I can remember when a parson, you two can too.
Yes.
Ernest
No, I can.
had catechism in the dining room. 150 years later, we had catechism in his dining room.
And where's this building?
It's
Over
this,
here.
it's this
Heritage
wing.
room.
Heritage room.
That those stories.
It's still
Yeah.
attached, it's just not.
And I can remember Jim Fisher started a children's choir, and the mamas decided we'd have the black skirts and the white, well, Bowler probably did, because she could sew anything,
Right.
but they made these things,
Catherine Bell too.
yes. Yes.
Might have been a little
The Cath-
grouchy about it,
Like, when they go,
But she'd have made them.
That's 1960.
but she kept you straight.
that's your hours.
Wait, was she?
That's okay.
Probably my memories are from like 50 couple, because Rusty was born in 50, and Rusty sang in that choir, so we've got to go further, than that, so it's like 55, something like that. He was a cute little thing. Okay, the old parsonage or first congregation house or Gemein house. A log building 30 to 40 feet in length and 22 to 24 feet in width was built on this site during the month of March 1749.
I misspoke. I said it's the one that's there now. I'm wrong.
Well, it's
It was
on
a
that site.
Very similar.
This was the first building built by the congregation on this site. So that 1749 was the first building. It served as a combined church, parsonage, and schoolhouse. It had 2 stories and a garret. The first floor containing a schoolroom and quarters for the pastor and his family. The second floor was furnished in the most simple and primitive manner with only such articles as were absolutely needed. A chair and a table for the minister, benches for the congregation, a gun corner, perhaps he's already read parts of this, unless the rifles were left in the schoolroom below. Tallow candles furnishing light for the evening services, no instrument to lead the singing, and we went through that. Okay, on January 15th, 1797, the Congregational Council considered the building of a new schoolhouse, as the parsonage was then generally called. They decided on January 21st, 1797, that it was necessary to build and that they would build as the old house, which had stood for 48 years, was very much out of repair. That the new house should be built of brick and reckoned that the cost would be about $1,600. And a subscription of $288 was made, to which $213.33 was in the treasury. From the cultivation of the church land was added, making $501.33 in hand. Between then and the following August, plans were drawn and redrawn. The clay for the bricks were dug on John Weller's farm. Is that Bill Eiler's?
This is where Bill Auer lives, but it's not his farm now. That piece was sold to the
Pastor's household goods were moved into a member house where the parsonage family was to have a temporary home. The old building was torn down and the new foundations dug. The new house was to be larger than the old one, measuring 37.5 feet wide. Okay, it had been 22 to 24, so considerable addition. And 35 feet on the sides running back to the church. According to the plans in the archives, the first floor on the north side of the house was to have a kitchen and a dining room. In the kitchen, there was to be a bake oven on one side of the large fireplace. The south side of the first floor was occupied entirely by the large school window nearest the sanctuary, the other leading into the sanctuary. Okay. On May 10th and 11th, 1798, the pastor and his wife took possession of the house with praise and thanks to the Savior and dedicated it to him as an abode of peace. On Sunday, May 12th, 1798, the congregation dedicated the house to the glory of his name. With numerous renovations and minor changes, the building has remained essentially the same. Ground was broken for the new parsonage in April 1960. On Sunday, May 21st, 1972, the old parsonage, after extensive restoration and renovation, was reopened for use. On October 8th, 1972, was the date for the rededication of this ancient and hallowed facility as the Hubner Memorial Christian Education Wing in memory of a former pastor, the Reverend Robert Hubner.
this was built in 72 also, or thereabouts.
The houses that the Ceases live in or owned, out Graceham Road, past the fire department, that was standing at this time, correct? They're brick house.
Sterling?
Mary Jean.
Sterling's had-
Oh,
That was like
his
one of
home
the first
place.
houses in this area.
Right, he came, the Ceases came early.
They
And
were-
we're,
Sterling was raised in that house.
Yeah.
And bought it from family.
yeah, well, they were family member, they came here shortly after we were organized. And I'll tell you, there are two houses where Ray Bryce lived, that was the Cease, Godfrey Cease, and the other one on the other side, across from it, was another Cease, James or something, I forget that right now. But they were built, I'm not gonna tell you those dates.
Yeah.
I didn't think. it was-
Mary Jean talked about the kitchen and the downstairs of that house, that it had not been renovated. It was the way it was built. And I think the family felt strongly they weren't going to change what was there. That doesn't mean bathrooms weren't added and running water, but trying to keep it as much like the original.
I
They
think
were,
there's a plaque on the house, like the dates and that, I think.
could be, I don't know.
And it's still in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, Phyllis
Phyllis
owns
and her
it,
husband own it.
yeah.
Did anybody know how big was the congregation when they were doing all of this?
Well, you know, we can, I'll tell you, I have, this is perhaps the driest part. It gets great here. Come, at least I think it's great. We're gonna talk about Indians visiting us. We're gonna talk about the occupations of the church members.
Well, you can take the, not how much money they needed, divide by how much money they're gonna ask everybody to contribute.
To get that $288. Yep, that's Joey's job, she can figure that.
To get the money in it to do all of this, you know, I was just wondering, you know.
Well, whenever they did anything, they talked about it, then they had a vote, and then they had a thing called a subscription. And each person was
We would
asked.
call it pledge.
How much, a pledge.
Yeah.
Each person was asked how much they could pledge. And they took the pledge proposals and they added them up, and then they knew where they were going from there. And now, on top of that, you're gonna hear about when we built this building, the brick one. They sent two guys out, they went to the Lehigh Valley, to churches to visit, to see if people could give them money to do this. They did that with Central Moravian Church, because they built a church that was bigger seating than all the people in town.
Oh, yeah.
So they overbuilt.
They were looking to the future.
And that's right, they were, but they got in bad shape to the point where they needed, I think all the churches were asked to give money to help pay for it.
Yeah.
We do use the space, I mean, it was packed for Bishop Pleasant's funeral. He needed that space, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So anyhow, those are just some of the tidbits, and I got tons of tidbits coming.
It tells about Christmas services, and there were 300 and so many people who attended the service, and we were going,
That's coming too.
yeah.
Way more
But-
than that.
Yep, and the huge numbers are because it was a church they would be welcome at. It didn't matter if it was your church. You know, Christmas, Easter visitors existed even back then. Yeah,
We're gonna wrap it up.
thank you, Michael.
And I'm gonna endeavor to do a little prayer. I love this class, I love what we're talking about, I love my church. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for a wonderful denomination and a congregation. Help us, I pray, that we might emulate what has come before us, that we may not be afraid to step into to help the effort, to grow your kingdom here on this church, and to grow what I think is a fine and wonderful denomination. Thank you, Lord, for all your many blessings, and the people who have come here to take away from it good things. Thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
That was good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
This was short enough.